Good Tuesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. It is cutdown day in the NFL. The Browns got down to their 53-man roster that was mandated just now by 4 o'clock. Got it done a little early. Let's take a look at the guys that the Browns cut. Some familiar names on there, but no real huge surprises. You look at the linemen. Blake Hance, a tackle who played a little bit. Alex Taylor, another offensive lineman. Fullback Johnny Stanton. Running back John Kelly Jr., who played well. You also look at Miller Forrestall. So right now the Browns only have 2 tight ends on the active roster. We'll get into that a little bit later. Mike Harley Jr., a guy that would be a candidate for the practice squad, as would cornerback Sean Jolly. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. Tim, when you look at this, no real surprises, so to speak?
Yeah, there weren't really many surprises. I think we kind of knew that the roster was going to be largely settled before training camp even started, outside of maybe a couple of injuries, a couple of surprises. But, I mean, certainly some intriguing practice squad names or potential practice squad names that we see when you look at guys like Mike Harley Jr., Sean Jolly. Those guys had really good preseasons, training camps. Maybe Dalen Baldwin, the receiver from Michigan, who came in late, certainly showed a lot in practice. Maybe he sneaks on the practice squad. But I think by and large, this roster was mainly kind of established that there weren't going to be many spots available for – undrafted free agents, other guys coming into the organization, coming into camp to steal a spot. It's just kind of the way it is when you have a roster like the Browns, which is one of the better ones in the National Football League. And of course, it's important to remember that this is just the initial roster. This is going to look very different within a couple of days and probably very different within another month or 2 months, because we know how, fluid rosters can be with injuries and different things. So It's notable, obviously, in the sense that these are the initial 53 guys the Browns have, but you also have to look at just, it could change again in another 24 hours once waiver claims are made, once, more trades happen. This is just kind of the initial picture. And obviously, not a lot of new faces on there. We'll probably get some of the new faces on there, like Anthony Bell, the undrafted free agent who made the team, which is a tremendous story. But again, just shows there's not a lot of room on this sneak onto this roster.
Now let's take a look at what the roster looks like on the offensive side of things. So the quarterbacks, Brissett and Josh Dobbs. Deshaun Watson is serving his suspension. It started a few minutes ago at 4 o'clock officially, so he has left the building, if you will. They list Demetric Felton is a running back, so they give you 5. There's actually 4: Chubb, Hunt, Ford, Johnson. Felton has been working with the wide receivers. We mentioned only 2 tight ends, and you see a number of linemen, very good linemen as well. When you look at that, there's an area that jumps out that needs some upgrading, and that would be the wide receiver room without question. Right now you got Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Bell. You have Woods, and then Felton has been working there, and Anthony Schwartz. That needs some help. I think you would agree. I don't think anybody would argue with that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been the big thing, is this group has needed an upgrade, and, we got all the way to the initial 53-man, still no upgrades, but I felt maybe this is a situation where the best chance to get any upgrades, even incremental upgrades, was going to come after cutdown day, when the Browns kind of got a chance to see what these guys could do, to see, what stands out about this group, with this group of receivers. Obviously, with Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, you have a decent number 1, number 2 option. We saw David Bell really, have some good moments in those last 2 preseason games. Michael Woods was really impressing a lot of people, early in training camp before, of course, went down with a hamstring injury. It'll be interesting to see how much ground he still has to make up to even make it onto the field. Anthony Schwartz is clearly, the team is not giving up on him, despite the fact that, he had another rough night on Saturday night, got booed late in that first half after another drop. He's had a real tough preseason, and, he's going to have to figure out a way to turn this around pretty quickly. But yeah, like you said, they're going to need to find some help somewhere, whether it's trading for a guy like Darius Slayton or signing a guy like Tyler Johnson, who was cut by the Buccaneers. off their roster. They're going to need to get just another body on there, another guy who's caught some NFL passes, can kind of slide into the system and just kind of provide some cover, so you're not relying on much after those top three guys of Cooper, Peoples-Jones, and Bell.
And we'll get into some of those names that might be available in just a minute. All right, a guy that's intriguing out there that the Browns have been tied to is tight end O.J. Howard. So a former first-round pick. Bills released him, and there is belief that the Browns will chase him per a league source. O.J. Howard, again, really productive tight end out of Alabama, who just hasn't really put it together. Had a couple of really good years, Tim, with the Buccaneers, but last couple of years has not been as productive and failed to make the roster for the Bills this season as he got cut in the 53-man cutdown.
Yeah, and obviously, you look at this roster, there's only two tight ends. They're going to add a third at some point. I think that's a given. When you look at the roster, that's really the only glaring thing is it's just David Njoku and Harrison Bryant. Surprising kind of for Kevin Stefanski offense that he's on this initial 53-man, got only two tight ends, but we've seen him play three or sometimes even four at times in certain packages. So I look at O.J. Howard, he would be kind of a low-risk, potentially high-reward player because he's a guy that, is going to be available. It's a question of, can he slide down the waiver wire enough for the Browns to pick him up as the third tight end? Because you look at his numbers back when he was after the Buccaneers made him, I believe it was a first-round pick in 2017, the 19th overall. 3 consecutive seasons of at least 400 yards, 400 receiving yards. Then the last 2 seasons just has not been able to stay healthy. Only played 4 games in 2020 and then kind of got passed up when Tampa Bay brought in Rob Gronkowski. So there's talent there, I think, but, it's unfortunate for a player of his caliber because we saw at Alabama just how tremendously talented he is, but injuries have clearly taken a toll on him. And I think, if you have him as the third guy behind Njoku and Bryant, it's a pretty good trio at tight end.
So this is how this works. The Browns would have to put in claims. It goes in the draft order. So the worst teams get the first claims. And we'll give you an idea. So 4 o'clock today, everybody had to be down to the 53-man limit. They are there. Teams can put in claims. They have to put in their claims by noon tomorrow. Then starting right around noon, right after that deadline, teams start getting notified if the waiver claims were successful, and you'll start hearing tomorrow, noon, 1, 2, 3, 4, if the Browns, in fact, do get some of the waiver claims that they put in. Figures to be a couple of them that the Browns will put in, and we'll get into some of the guys they may be looking at wide receiver in just a minute. But that gives you the mechanism for what it means when the Browns would put in waiver claims. All right, we're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about that position group that everybody wants to talk about, wide receiver.
Hi, this is Ron from down here in Clayton, Ohio. And I want to start off first by saying I love your guys' show. Watch it every day. Very informative. But what I'm calling about is our wide receiver room. We came into the season knowing that we had a really, really depleted wide receiver room. And they went out and they got Amari Cooper, which was a great deal, in my opinion. Didn't have to give a lot for him, great receiver. But after that, I don't know, I know Donovan Peoples-Jones is a good receiver too. But we're going to have to be a lot deeper than that with the competition we're going to have in our division. We got a wicked bad division. And every team, well, just like last year with the Bengals going to the Super Bowl after being in last place, we got a really, really big time division. So I'm wondering what you think. Do you think we're going to stand pat? Because Schwartz hasn't shown anything in the preseason. He can't hold on to the ball. And the other guys, they're rookies. I don't know what you can expect from a rookie. Sometimes you hit a cash cow. Sometimes you don't hit anything. So do you think the Browns are going to try and do something with their room, or do you think they're going to try and stay pat and just kind of look to next season? Thanks a lot, guys. Love the show. Go Browns. Woof.
Appreciate all the voicemails. Tim, I would be stunned if the Browns do not try to address and add to that wide receiver room.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to. I mean, it's just a question of who they go out and get. Is it going to be, like I mentioned, a couple of those guys, if they trade for someone like Darius Slayton or Denzel Mims, we talked about some names last time I was on about a week ago about, potential trade options. And I get, the pessimism around rookie receivers. I get that because it's hard to trust rookies because they've never been through the grind of the NFL season. One thing I will point out that I would caution people against being, worried about rookies is considering the amount of reps these guys now get in the college game, how many times college football teams are throwing the football. These guys are more prepared to play now than they ever were, coming in the NFL. I mean, it's not uncommon for, receivers to come in and absolutely just have a tremendous season. And one example I'll point to is last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown, taken in the fourth round by the Detroit Lions, had 90 catches last season. So you can find really good receivers all across the draft, and that was a rookie, and all of a sudden he looks like a really good receiver. Steal in that fourth round, a guy I really liked in that draft class. Now, I'm not saying that David Bell or Michael Woods are going to have 90 catch seasons. I just don't think that's going to happen because you have Amari Cooper, you have David Njoku, you have Donovan Peoples-Jones, you have Kareem Hunt, you have all these guys who are going to catch footballs, but you got to believe that David Bell is going to have some kind of role this season. He may not catch 90 passes, but I certainly think 40 to 50 is a reasonable possibility. He'll get a couple touchdowns in there. What we saw in that final preseason game from him is just he seems like he has an innate ability to find space, and I think that can't be understated when it comes to receivers. That's kind of that seems like the philosophy that the Browns have gone for this year when it comes to adding receivers. The three big names they added, Amari Cooper, David Bell, Michael Woods, they specialize in finding ways to get open. And I think that's an underrated tool that in the NFL, because you can have all these great physical tools. You can be the fastest player, you can be the biggest guy out there, but the best way to succeed is to get open, to make yourself an easy target for a quarterback, knowing that you're going to find a way to get open as a receiver and that your quarterback can find you. And with Jacoby Brissett playing, these first 11 games, he's going to need guys that are going to get open for him, and these guys certainly have the ability to do that.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we'll take a look at some of the moves the Browns may make. We'll dive deeper into wide receivers that are available. Take a look at the defense. Sports4CLE will be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
Tim Bielik and I continue talking Browns. So we've mentioned the Browns trying to find a way to upgrade that wide receiver room. Jack Duffin has some ideas. He thinks the Browns will attempt to try to sign O.J. Howard, and cut Chase Winovich. Now, I would say The Browns could also put Winovich, who hasn't practiced in 3 weeks, on short-term IR, which would create a roster spot, and you kind of push that decision down the road a little bit. He also thinks the potential would be a trade for Darius Slayton from the Giants. DEJ is Dearness Johnson. So Slayton for Johnson, his two ideas. Now, Slayton is practicing with the Giants as we are on the air, so he's out there practicing. Another guy that is rumored to be on the trade block, Denzel Mims. So the Jets did not cut Mims. He was out practicing. But again, the Jets were rumored to be exploring a trade for Denzel Mims. So that's another name that the Browns could acquire. When you look at these two guys, Tim, either of them intriguing for the wide receivers?
I think both are interesting to me. I mean, we've seen Darius Slayton, with the Giants, put us in good seasons. First 2 years with the Giants, you're talking back-to-back 700-yard seasons. His number has obviously tailed off a year ago, but obviously, if he came from the Giants to the Browns, you would have a quarterback upgrade, especially after the 11th game when Deshaun Watson is slated to take over. And Denzel Mims, I think would be a really good addition too. He struggled last season, but after another good rookie season, I think you're looking at two interesting young receivers out of New York. It's a question of whether or not they'll be able to get either of these guys. I'm fascinated by both of them because they're still young. They're still young enough players where I think they can still contribute. I look at Denzel Mims in particular. He only caught 8 passes last season for the Jets. And obviously, they had a quarterback issue with Zach Wilson being banged up. And then they go and draft Garrett Wilson. So you wonder how much longer of a future Denzel Mims has with the Jets. So I would be very interested in either of these guys. Both of them have good tools, and I think they would provide some good depth and good enough experience, I think, to continue to round out that receiver group.
Yeah, when you look at Mims in particular, the Jets signed Corey Davis as a free agent. Then they went out and drafted Elijah Moore from Mississippi in the 2nd round. So that kind of pushed him down. All right, if the Browns look to guys that have been waived, these are some guys that were cut today. And you look at it, and from the Chiefs, there is Josh Gordon. From the Dolphins, there is Muhammad Sanu, Preston Williams, and Lynn Bowden. From the Vikings, you've got Albert Wilson. 49ers, you got Willie Snead. Veteran wide receiver, was with the Ravens for a while. And then when you look at the Buccaneers, Tyler Johnson, a guy that relatively young that just hasn't been able to get any traction with Tampa Bay. The other thing to keep in mind with a guy like Bowden, he's a kick returner. That's obviously an area that is unsettled for the Browns. Who of that group kind of intrigues you, Tim?
I'm big on Tyler Johnson. This is a guy who I thought, go all the way back to the 2020 draft. There was no reason he should have been a 5th-round pick. I thought he was way better than that coming out of Minnesota. And, going to Tampa Bay, I thought, really he didn't get a chance to show what he was capable of doing. And, I mean, it's fair. It's reasonable to understand why, considering you look at how deep that Tampa Bay wide receiver room is, and it only got deeper when they added Julio Jones in the offseason. But, Johnson had some solid numbers last season, 36 catches, 360 yards. So there's talent there. I mean, obviously, when you look at his college film, I thought he was sensational. I think he'd be a good fit for this receiver core, maybe more unproven than Darius Slayton and Denzel Mims. But he would be a guy out of that group I would look at. I look at some of those names on here. I don't know how much more gas Muhammad Sanu has left. Same with, Willie Snead. Josh Gordon, I don't know if Cleveland wants to revisit that. I mean, we've been down, the Browns have been down that road so many times. I don't know if they would want to go down that road one more time. So for me, if I'm looking at this group, far and away, the number one choice for me would be Tyler Johnson.
Fair enough. Let's take a look at the Browns' defense. So as it stands, the 53 men that are on the defensive side of the ball, and defensive ends, Garrett Clowney, Wright, Rochelle, Thomas, and Winovich. And the fact that Rochelle and Winovich both made the final 53, maybe a little bit of a surprise. The tackle room probably still needs some upgrading. You've got a couple of young guys in Togiai and Winfrey. And then on the safeties, both Richard LeCount and DeAnthony Bell make the 53-man roster. You got 5 really good corners that are listed there. But when you look at DeAnthony Bell, and this tweet is from Jack Duffin, DeAnthony Bell becomes the first ever undrafted rookie free agent to make the 53-man roster in the Andrew Berry era. So, and he, by all accounts, he deserved to. Showed up on special teams, was a factor as a guy that hits and plays really well.
Yeah, and it's a great story, anytime you have a UDFA, a guy that really nobody ever heard of, especially in that draft cycle, make the team. It's a great story, and it's great for DeAnthony Bell that he gets to make this 53-man roster. And you kind of hit it right on that special teams matters. It's clear, with Mike Prefer as part of the coaching staff, that special teams is a point of emphasis. I think Bell could be a really interesting player on those kick coverage teams that we saw against the Bears. Very nearly blocked the punt. I think that was kind of the moment where, to me, I kind of look at DeAnthony Bell. I'm like, it's going to be hard to keep him out the 53-man roster. Sure enough, he makes the team. And I think as much as you got to save space for, certain players, for those starter spots, those backup spots, you also got to think about special teams a little bit, because these backups are going to play a pretty important role in special teams. So to keep DeAnthony Bell on the roster tells you that they value that kick coverage unit, and then they want a guy who will be able to have the ability to go down there and try and make some key plays in that kick coverage game.
So mentioned defensive tackles. Browns likely need to upgrade that spot. Couple of names that are out there after being cut. The Chiefs cut Danny Shelton, former Browns first-round pick. The Raiders cut Vernon Butler, another guy that was highly thought of, defensive tackle. And then one of the last cuts for the 49ers, Robert Ndiche, who was also a former first-rounder. Basically, Tim, they're looking for a big guy that can shut down the run. And any of those 3 guys kind of fit that bill.
Yeah, I think of those 3, I would kind of target Danny Shelton if it were my choice, just because I feel like, with the Browns, what they have at defensive tackle right now are some quicker guys who are able to make some plays through splitting gaps, penetration, causing disruption, but they don't have that guy who's just going to stand there and kind of be a wall and take on blocks, more your traditional nose tackle type. Just a guy who's a big guy who's going to hold blocks, free things up for the rest of the defensive line. They don't have that, and I think Danny Shelton could do that. It's good for Danny Shelton that despite the struggles that he had early in his career in Cleveland, that he's gone on to forge a pretty good career elsewhere. Obviously, being cut today aside, he's been able to hang around the league for a few years, have some productive seasons. I think he could do well, potentially, if they wanted to bring him back again, just as that space-eating defensive tackle, just that type of player that they don't have on this roster, and they might need. Although it's clear based on how they've targeted that position a couple of years that that's just not the type of defensive tackle they value, and they value other positions more than that interior position.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we will talk a little Baker Mayfield as he's in the news again. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Cynthia Freeland on the Around the NFL podcast talked about an exchange she had post-game with the quarterback the Browns are going to be facing in Week 1.
You ran into Baker Mayfield, the former Browns quarterback, recently, and I was hoping you could share an exchange that you had.
It was after the field, or on the field after the game against the Bills, this preseason game 3, and I walked up to him like, "I'm so excited to see you." Like, go, I was like, "Kick some butt." I didn't say that word, but kick some butt, kid. Yeah. No, like, go kick some butt, especially Week 1. I cannot wait. And he uses some expletives, and I was like, "I just hope you're like," he's like, "I'm gonna bleep them up."
Ooh, that's being the Cleveland Browns, the Week 1 opponent
that's
of the
our Week 1
Carolina
opponent.
Panthers.
Depending on. And Tim, so it's just Baker Mayfield being Baker Mayfield. He can say it's, he's not going to lie, but Baker's being Baker.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised it took this long for him to kind of say something that would kind of get that matchup to be a little more significant than he was kind of letting on. I mean, obviously, he was saying that this game was one he had circled on the calendar, back earlier in the preseason. He was talking about that. But, if you're the Browns, you're looking for bulletin board material, here you go. This is the kind of thing that I would imagine that they've been waiting for, that they know Baker Mayfield better than anybody. I'm sure, I would imagine a couple of those guys were thinking, oh, he's going to say something. He's going to say a little something, kind of get everybody fired up. And then there it is for, everybody to see is this exchange. Granted, it is a secondhand exchange. So, you could take maybe a little bit of it with a grain of salt. But what's interesting is that Baker has said this. He said he's excited about the game, but the Browns really haven't said anything. When you talk all those defensive players that have spoken the last couple of weeks, they kind of downplayed it. Week 1's always important. We're excited, because it's, we get to play a forward teammate, all these different things, but you got to imagine this could get these guys really fired up. And if they want an excuse to go out and beat Baker, if they hadn't got one already, this might be the one that gets them there.
So we're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, and this one about that Cynthia Freeland exchange.
Hello, this is Thad from Youngstown. I read an article where Cynthia Freeland from NFL Network, and she's also Bill's beat reporter. She interviewed Baker Mayfield last Friday from the Buffalo Bills Carolina Panthers game, and she interviewed Baker Mayfield. He had some choice words about the Browns' first game, and he used the F-bomb on us about what he was going to do with the Browns. And I try to give Baker benefit of the doubt, man. I try to wish him well. But you know what? Clowney and Miles, get him. And get him good. Your thoughts, please. Love the show.
As always, appreciate it. Tim, I think the defense is silent publicly and privately. They know what they went against Baker Mayfield every day in practice, and there is an advantage that they have.
Yeah, and I think the disadvantage that Baker has, he's not going to be protected by the Browns' offensive line. And I know Carolina drafted a really good young offensive tackle in Ike Mekwonu with the 6th pick in the draft. He has not faced Myles Garrett. He has not faced Jadeveon Clowney. He's faced some decent pass rushers on his team, but those guys are, elite defensive linemen for a reason. And I think with those guys considering all the noise that's kind of come out over the last 24 hours with what Baker had to say and probably what they've been thinking about all offseason long, all training camp long, I got to imagine they're kind of like licking their chops to try and get after that offensive line and see if they can get to Baker, bring him down, because we saw, Baker will hold on the ball at times. He'll be looking around, he'll be patting it, maybe holding it too long, and you hold it too long against Garrett and Clowney, they can make you pay for it.
Let's take a look. This is a tweet from Cody Suick. Nick Chubb in 2021. And you look at it, 41 explosive plays, second best. You see the 4.24 yards after contact, second best in the NFL, 57 tackles that he forced to be missed. That's tied for third. And the 1.19 yards over expected rushing attempts, that is fourth best. It's pretty elite.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, no question, he's put up some great numbers in these first 4 seasons. So we'll see what he's got in year 5. And he's going to need to continue to play at that level with Jacoby Brissett as his backup, knowing that, as the starter for the first 11 games, I just say, because, he's kind of he's obviously a step down talent-wise from Baker Mayfield, but you're going to need Nick Chubb to really kind of carry the load more than he has in the past couple seasons, because, you're going to need those guys to help lift Jacoby Brissett up.
So Nick Chubb on Instagram, and this is in reference to a ranking tiers that the NFL, or ESPN actually, put out about the NFL. They had him ranked as a tier 4 running back. James Conner was there, Cam Akers, Leonard Fournette, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne, and Aaron Jones. And I think that's a little bit of a motivational thing there for Nick Chubb as they rank him with those. I think that's a little low in that company. Nick Chubb, you take them head and shoulders above everybody else that's listed there.
Easily. And if he's tier 4, I want to know what the other 3 tiers are, because you can argue Nick Chubb is as good a running back as there is in the NFL. And even if you look at the stats, you look at his play on the field, I don't know how you could consider him a tier 4 running back. That really, it's baffling to me. There's really no basis for, why you would put him there. I mean, if you want to look for anything that he could do better, maybe it's as a receiver. But that's what the Browns have Kareem Hunt for, is he's more of their pass-catching running back than Nick Chubb, who, Chubb showed he can do some things out of the backfield. We all remember that screen pass he took for a touchdown against the Steelers in the wild card game. But, I saw that Instagram thing this morning. I've admittedly struggled to figure out why he would be put there as a tier 4 running back. Him and Aaron Jones both, they should be higher. It's puzzling to me that he would be kind of where he is on that list, considering all these other rankings where we've seen the Browns have the best running back room in the NFL, and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt being probably the best 1-2 combination in the league. So it's puzzling, but if you're a player, you look for anything that kind of gets you motivated. And what we've seen in Nick Chubb more often than not, what the Browns defense is doing with Baker right now, he's planning on doing his talking on the field.
All right, before we go to break, this also from Instagram. Michael Woods, who did make part of the 53-man roster for the Browns, and you see that one of 53 had been bothered by hamstring injuries, back on the field, was doing individual drills, so progressing towards getting back and getting in. He's another guy that if he goes and doesn't get quite where they want him to, he could be a short-term injured list kind of guy.
Yeah, and obviously, like I was talking about earlier, he was a guy that seemed like he was one of the early camp standouts, that he was kind of had some, surprising people early with his performance in practice, and obviously went down with a hamstring issue, and he hasn't really been able to do much since. It's kind of unfortunate because, again, you would have been fascinated to see how he could have done in these preseason games, what he would have been able to look like with more reps, maybe even get some more first team work potentially, depending on how certain things would go. But, he's a guy I'm curious about. I've watched a lot of highlight film lately, and the thing that sticks out, like David Bell, Michael Woods knows how to get open. He may not be the fastest guy, might not be the most athletic guy, but he's got a little savvy to his game. And I'm curious how that plays out. Again, that seems like that's been the theme for Andrew Berry this offseason, is finding receivers who can get open. Woods is probably not going to play a lot right away, even when he comes back, because he's still got to get up to speed. And regular season NFL speed, far different than anything Michael Woods has seen or even David Bell has seen. So while it could be a while before we see Woods, but, good for him that he's on the 53. And I'm curious to kind of see how he progresses throughout his young career.
Tim Bielik and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll review a little bit about the preseason and talk a little bit about Jimmy Garoppolo. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. This is from the Bleacher Report, winners and losers from the 2022 preseason. Losers, the Browns passing game. Browns passing game was dreadful in their lone outing with Brissett in the preseason. Browns backups showed they lacked depth at wide receiver. Anthony Schwartz looked unplayable as he struggled with 3 drops on 6 targets. Tim, that's fair enough, but again, there's no Amari Cooper, there's no Nick Chubb, there's no Kareem Hunt, there's no Joel Bitonio, and there's no Jack Conklin. So in some instances, you were playing your backups against other team starters.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to know from that game is Jacoby Brissett threw 23 times, and he still didn't even play the final minute or two of the first half. I mean, if he's throwing 23 passes in a half, then something went very wrong in the game plan and in the offense. I mean, they're going to run the football a lot more in the regular season, especially with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt out there, maybe even Dearness Johnson at certain times. It's clear from the way that they approached that game, they were going to try to throw a lot, try and get Jacoby Brissett, some work in the passing game. And it's clear also they wanted to target Anthony Schwartz a lot. They wanted to feature him a little more to try and get his confidence up, and it went the other direction. Obviously got tackled, there was the interception where he got tackled, which probably should have been a penalty that wasn't called. He had those 3 drops. He got booed in that first half. So obviously that was a negative. And obviously he had a difficult night. But I think in an ideal situation, when you're actually game planning for an opponent, instead of trying to work things out in live situations, you're going to be targeting Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Bell, and David Njoku a lot more than you're going to be targeting Anthony Schwartz or featuring Anthony Schwartz in any of these offensive plays. I think that's important to remember. Maybe even more so Kareem Hunt or Harrison Bryant. That's just the nature of the way this offense is going to be, right? And it's clear that they were working on certain things you don't game plan for opponents in the preseason. You work on certain things, and that's I think the number one takeaway you have to remember in these certain things is nobody's trying specifically to win these preseason games unless there's about 5 minutes to go and you want to see if the backups can lead a game-winning touchdown drive. Other than that, you're trying to get certain things ironed out. You're trying to get a quarterback used to throwing behind several of his starting offensive linemen, maybe a couple of his starters, although not all of them are going to be there. They didn't need all those guys they're going to have on the field against Carolina. So again, you can really have to take some of that night with a grain of salt.
So after we finished up yesterday's show, there was some movement with Jimmy Garoppolo, and in fact, he has signed a reduced contract with guaranteed money to stay in San Francisco. A one-year contract that will keep him in San Francisco. It contains a no-trade, no-tag clause assuring Garoppolo will remain in San Francisco and have the freedom to leave in 2023. $6.5 million. There's incentives for games played and games started that could get him another $16 million. What they have done is they have made him more tradable to a team that is willing to give up some capital to get him. It's a win for Garoppolo because he can choose where he goes. He can make sure that if he doesn't like the situation, he can invoke the no-trade clause. If the 49ers are happy with what someone gives them as far as capital, they can trade him.
Yeah, and I think the thing that sticks out to me is, they're paying him a lot of money, in this extra money to make sure he doesn't go to the Seattle Seahawks. I feel like, how often we talked about, that might have been the most likely scenario is that if he goes anywhere, it would have been to Seattle. And of course, the last thing you would want if you're the 49ers is having your former starting quarterback go to a division rival and you have to face him twice a season. Obviously, that's not ideal. You don't know exactly how he would have performed, where he exactly would have gone. Maybe he does go to Seattle. Maybe another team like the Colts or the Browns, for example, decides they want to get him and, secure a young quarterback in the building as insurance in case, their starter doesn't perform or whatever. But the thing that sticks out to me is concerning about this from a San Francisco perspective. Where are they at with Trey Lance? I think this, as much as I think it's good for Garoppolo to get some guaranteed money, I think this, if I'm Trey Lance, it's kind of rubs me the wrong way because they gave up all this draft capital to go up and get Trey Lance, and they brought Jimmy Garoppolo back before Trey Lance even makes his first start. And Trey Lance did not really look good in the preseason finale against Houston. That was on Thursday night. So, you worry about that undermining a young quarterback's confidence. But one thing's for sure from a Browns perspective, if they want to get Jimmy Garoppolo, they're not going to have to pay a little more than I think everybody was expecting would have taken prior to yesterday.
The other thing is contrast Jimmy Garoppolo with Baker Mayfield. And they brought in a rookie, and the Browns brought in an established guy who had some success. So it just shows you, and everybody is talking about the way the Browns treated Baker, the way the 49ers treated Garoppolo. I'm looking at it the way that Garoppolo, a guy that went to a Super Bowl, played in an NFC championship game as well, handled the whole situation with, we need to upgrade the position and we're going to go draft this guy.
Yeah, the fact that he was willing to come back, sign that guaranteed contract speaks volumes kind of about his professionalism. And, I think those are the things that, some people have questioned about Baker and Jimmy Garoppolo. You can't deny that he's a pretty consummate professional. He may not be as talented as some of the other quarterbacks, but he does make, I think, the most of what he has. And the fact that he's gone to a Super Bowl and gone to another NFC Championship game shows you that he has some talent to work with. He's not elite, but he's good enough to win you some football games and get you into the playoffs.
Tim Bielik, is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you read him. Pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Jackson McCurry, co-host of the Dawgland and the Top Dogs podcast. We're still talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one, a takeaway from preseason.
Hey, talking about the preseason thing. Here's what I got out of that preseason, as a betting person and a fan, a Browns fan. Is Chicago's first team was pretty good. The Browns didn't even play the first team. So I evaluate the game as, how did we do? How did our reserves do? Because that's what we're really talking about here. And I noticed that the Browns reserves was a lot better than the reserves and half of the starters for the Bears. And that's what I took away from it. And I think we got a very deep team this year and a good team. It's about holding on until Deshaun gets back. And I think we're in good shape for that. Go Browns.
All right, as always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jackson McCurry, co-host of the Dawgland and the Top Dogs podcast. Jackson, I didn't really think of that until the caller mentioned it. There were a number of guys that the Browns didn't play. They didn't play any of their top guys that they were worried about. And it is a pretty deep team.
Yeah, I think so. I think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski had to feel really good about this roster and the amount of depth that they had and how those guys down the depth chart contributed throughout the preseason. So you would have to feel really good going into the regular season. And the caller brought it up. As long as Jacoby Brissett can keep this team afloat at the quarterback position until Deshaun Watson comes back late in the year, the Browns will be in really good shape, I think.
I would agree. And the thing to keep in mind about Brissett's first game, they were force-feeding Anthony Schwartz the football, trying to get him some confidence. I don't think that's going to happen. If you're Kevin Stefanski, what is the recipe for winning with Jacoby Brissett, do you think?
So I think you want to limit his mistakes, which he's done well throughout his career. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He does hold on to the ball quite a long time. But the best thing is to limit his mistakes, and you have two all-pro caliber running backs behind him, and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I think you want to run the ball, set up the play action just like they've done the last couple of years, limit Brissett's mistakes, and then hope the defense continues to play at a high level, which they did down the stretch last year. Unfortunately, the offense couldn't live up to their end of the bargain, but if the defense is rolling the way they did last year and you keep running the ball well and set up the play action and the passing game, I think that's the best recipe for success for Stefanski going forward.
So without question, the wide receiving core is not deep. I have two thoughts about how you get around that. One, I think you play Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb together, and you can even sprinkle in D'Ernest Johnson and maybe even Jerome Ford. And don't be afraid to throw to those guys. Those guys can, in fact, become another receiver out of the backfield.
Yeah, without question. You got all those guys that have a history of catching the ball out of the backfield. We know what Kareem Hunt can do at a high level. Chubb and D'Ernest have done it. They've sprinkled them in, Jerome Ford, we've seen what he can do in the preseason in terms of being a pass catcher. So there's plenty of weapons to go around. I think the depth is the biggest concern, I think, at the receiver position. But you have to remember, you have Njoku and Bryant at the tight end position, Demetric Felton, who's that Swiss Army knife, and then you still have Amari Cooper, you still have Donovan Peoples-Jones, and then if David Bell lives up to the hype as a third-round pick, I feel good about the skill position. I know the depth is a cause for concern, but everybody else seems pretty good at the top.
Yeah, and that's the other way that you do it. You utilize the tight ends in Njoku and Harrison Bryant. They're probably going to find another tight end to add to that mix. But Jacoby Brissett and Deshaun Watson, when he comes back, both have a history of throwing to the tight ends and throwing to the tight ends a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Jacoby Brissett at Indy, he had Eric Ebron, he had Jack Doyle. Miami had Mike Gesicki, so he's had a good history of throwing the ball to the tight ends. Houston, Darren Fells, who was here in 2018 with Baker, went down to Houston and continued to have success with Deshaun Watson throwing him the football. So I think the tight end position is a position that the Browns fans seem to sleep on because they're so focused on the wide receiver position. But we paid Njoku a lot of money this offseason, and I think he's going to be a big part of this offense. And then Harrison Bryant leaps into the tight end 2 role. He's actually one of my guys that are under the radar, I think, on this Browns team. I think Harrison Bryant can be a big impact guy. He was the top tight end, or he won the top tight end award in college before entering the draft. And I thought the Browns got a steal with him in the 4th round. So I expect his role to increase, and I think he could be a big impact going forward.
And both of those guys, both Bryant and Njoku, move well enough that if you want to kind of split them out as a wide receiver, you can do that and create some matchup problems.
Yeah, without a doubt. They're both about 6'4", 6'5". Like you said, they can cause matchup problems. I think that would be a good idea, flanking them out at wide receiver. If you want to give Amari a rest, Peoples-Jones a rest, having those 2 big bodies like that, and even if they bring in an O.J. Howard that Jack Duffin mentioned or somebody else at the tight end position, because I think they're going to add at least one more, having the big bodies like that could definitely cause some matchup nightmares for opposing defenses.
All right, with Brissett, what do you expect the offense to look like? I know he's pretty good at minimizing turnovers. Is he a guy that you expect him to have him throw from the pocket, or are you going to try to play action and roll him out? What do you think Kevin Stefanski does with him to maximize his effectiveness?
I mean, if you base it on what happened Saturday night against the Bears, he seems to be the type that can throw from the pocket, and they're going to do that. But he does have some mobility to his game, so I won't shock me if they keep the play action going. It seems to be a stalwart in Stefanski's offense, but I think Jacoby can do both things. So I would expect they're gonna do both. We've seen Stefanski line Baker up in the shotgun, so it wouldn't shock me if Brissett does that. Now, Brissett doesn't have the arm that Baker had, but he can do the short and intermediate throws. So, and I think we have the weapons that accommodate him in that skill set. So if they use them from the pocket primarily, that's good. But I do think they will sprinkle in the play action because that's what this offense has been built upon the last couple of years with Stefanski.
Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland and the Top Dog podcasts. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, an interesting safety is now available, has been cut with ties to Kevin Stefanski. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jackson McCurry, co-host of the Dawgland and the Top Dog podcast. Some news coming out of Philadelphia. Eagles were very active today. Made a trade and got a safety brought in. And then they released their former starting safety Anthony Harris. And Harris is a guy that played with the Vikings when Kevin Stefanski was there. Jackson, safety is not an area of need. The Browns have pretty good depth, but Anthony Harris is an intriguing name. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise just because Harris is a name. You mentioned he does have the ties to Stefanski. Could they make a move at safety? Possibly. I just don't see it in the cards. I just think they feel really good about the safety position right now with Grant Delpit finally being 100%. John Johnson III had a strong second half and expect him to carry that over into 2022. They have Ronnie Harrison. They have Richard LeCount, who they drafted late last year, and then DeAnthony Bell, who made the initial 53, and he made quite some noise in the preseason. So I wouldn't expect it, but if they want some more veteran leadership on that defensive side of the ball, Harris would seem to make sense. They don't have that true free safety, which Harris could be, but I think they feel confident in the safeties they have as of now.
Yeah, the safety and the cornerback, that defensive secondary, really deep, really talented. It'll be interesting to see. Let me ask you, how concerned are you with the Browns' return game? It looked like it was going to be a strength, and then Jakeem Grant goes down with the Achilles injury. Now it appears they're going back to Demetric Felton. Felton was pretty good early, and then something happened, and he just kind of lost the ability to make plays in the return game.
Yeah, I mean, Jakeem Grant was going to be a huge part of this team and the return game as well as wide receiver. But now you go back to Demetric Felton, who I agree with you. He had a strong start in the punt return game, was in the top 10, I think, in punt return yards. And then those 2 fumbles in the Baltimore game really, I think, lost his confidence there a bit. And the Browns obviously went another direction. I wouldn't be shocked if they still add somebody through the waiver wire. I think this is the back end of the roster is still going to be very fluid throughout the season, but I think they still feel confident in Felton. He's obviously still with the team. They're using him as both running back and wide receiver. So if they feel confident in him to go back there and return punts and even return kicks, you have to feel confident going forward until he proves otherwise.
Yeah, and the thing about Felton, when Alex Van Pelt talked to the media, I think it was last week, he mentioned Felton as the slot guy. He mentioned Amari, DPJ, and then Felton. So Felton's kind of working his way back up that pecking order, if you will. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Who are some of the under-the-radar guys that you think could end up having big seasons and help the Browns out?
Well, I mentioned Harrison Bryant a little bit ago when we were talking about the tight end room. He's my under-the-radar guy on offense. But when I look at defense, I think it's Jacob Phillips. I mean, he's going into his 3rd year. The first couple of years have been injury-plagued. But when we look at the linebacker room, everybody talks about Anthony Walker and then JOK, who I think is a budding superstar in this league. But Jacob Phillips, they drafted him in the 3rd round in 2020. I think they had a role for him in mind. And, Anthony Walker might not be a long-term guy here. So if Jacob Phillips can finally be healthy, I think he can be that guy that the Browns want to pair up with JOK in the middle of that defense going forward. And if Phillips can stay healthy, and I think that's the ultimate key at this point, I think he is going to eventually jump over Anthony Walker and then have him and JOK in the middle of that defense. They're both got speed. They're both athletic, and they can both cover. I just feel really good about the linebacker room going forward with Phillips and JOK.
Yeah, I didn't realize how fast he was, and then you see what they like in him because he is a guy that'll – and if you think about it, you've got those safeties, and if you have linebackers and Phillips and JOK – you're pretty set against passing offenses. The thing that concerns you is, are people going to try to bludgeon you running the football, which not many teams can do these days.
Without a doubt, and I think that's why I'm still wary about the defensive tackle room. Like Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryant showed promise, but behind them, Tommy Togiai had a couple flashes, but Perion Winfrey didn't show anything promising throughout the preseason. So in terms of the depth, I just worry about that D tackle room because during the preseason, teams were just running up the middle on the Browns, and that hurt. Now, granted, Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney weren't out there, and I think those guys will help in the run defense, but that D tackle room is still a major cause for concern heading into the season.
Yeah, that would be, I think, is the biggest area of concern. Would you agree with that? And
yeah.
I will couch that by saying I liked what I saw from Jordan Elliott we kind of need to see that more consistently. If we see that consistently first 3 or 4 games, I'll feel a little bit better.
Without a doubt. If he can carry it over into the regular season, then I won't be as concerned. Because preseason, I mean, you see the flashes, but then you realize they're just glorified scrimmages. You can't take too much away from them. But yeah, the depth of the D tackle room and the depth of the receiver, if one of our top guys go down, those are the 2 alarming concerns right now heading into the regular season.
Jackson McCurry, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Really good stuff. Thanks so much, Jackson.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Jackson McCurry, make sure you catch him, co-host of the Dawgland and the Top Dawgs podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. We will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow on Sports4CLE.